Hello. Long time, truly no see. So, please be prepared for a really long video today. I kind of didn't want to do, since it's going to be such a long video, I didn't want to do like just voiceover and editing with clips just because I don't have my MacBook currently. It's like not working and I'm currently not in the United States. So I want to kind of wait till I go back home to buy a laptop. So I'm currently, I filmed my last video and edited it on Windows Media Player, and I would rather die before I do that again. So I'm gonna use a different service this time, Filmora, not sponsored, please. Of course not. This is probably gonna be my last Degrassi video for a long time. And I know my channel is like predominantly Degrassi, really, but that wasn't my intention for it to be like that. That's kind of just how it became. But I have ideas that I want to do for other stuff. Quite a few exciting things I kind of want to do. So this is probably going to be my last Degrassi video for a while, because I feel like just sticking to Degrassi videos always made me feel like I'm in a, not a writer's block, but I guess almost like a video block. Like I can never think of what to create. So this will be the last one, and so I want to make it both positive and negative, because I feel like that's kind of what I always did with my original like worst and best Degrassi videos. And then my last video was obviously in high praise of Degrassi, but I do think we always need to talk about the good and the bad. So let us begin now, 2 minutes later, with this list. The way that I'm going to do it is almost like a ping pong for the most part, except for a few parts that I edited and I was too lazy to fix, where it's basically almost going to be always like one good thing, one bad thing, one good thing, one bad thing, except for sometimes where I said like I edited things out completely to make this video shorter than it's already super long length, and I was too lazy to edit it. So I do want to start with a positive, because we are positive people in this apartment. So I put the title for this as something that Degrassi does well, something that is the fine wine of Degrassi, it ages well, is usually their mental health storylines in regards to characters who have bipolar disorder. And I'm obviously talking about Eli and then Craig, who also, if you saw my ranking all the Degrassi characters, you would know that those are two of the babies I would die for. They're probably my two favorite characters of all time. So I have a little bit of a script here, so if I'm ever looking down, that is why. So once they're introduced, like once the disorder, I suppose, is kind of introduced into their characters, what is so good about it, what makes it, I think, a storyline that actually is impactful and sticks well and is done well, is that one, it never feels out of character for these characters, if that makes sense. Because these characters probably most of the time were doing actions beforehand that were not completely showing stability, in my opinion, like mental stability, like Eli crashing his car on purpose to get Claire to come see him, or Craig crashing hotel rooms, Craig punching Joey after running away, things like that. It made sense for their characters. It would be completely different if like all of a sudden you told me that like Manny had bipolar disorder. I mean, yeah, I would buy it if you made it realistic, but I wouldn't be like, oh, okay. While with Eli and Craig, I do kind of feel that way. Like, I don't feel like when it was introduced, it felt unnatural. And then more importantly, is that once it was introduced, it came back. That's gonna be a reoccurring theme in this video. You're gonna notice, once this element was introduced, it wasn't just dropped and never mentioned again and fallen off the face of the planet. Eli's storyline with his bipolar disorder and coming to terms with it was, in my opinion, kind of already getting built up in season 10C. And then by season 11A, we finally got the official diagnosis that he was struggling with bipolar disorder and going off of his medication. And then that is something that would continue. We would see it again and come back in season 12 after Cam died and Eli was the one who found the body. It affected him. The drugs he kind of did were affecting him in season 12 too. So it's things that like don't just get dropped. They are things that come back and affect the character long term. Same thing with Craig. That manic behavior, the breakdowns, it's not like just one big breakdown, one big hotel break room scene and then it's over. There probably will never be as iconic of a freaking scene as when Craig destroyed that hotel room in season 4, but it was never just dropped again. And some of his behavior afterwards, like his cocaine thing, I think, that's not to say that if you're bipolar or anything, you're just always going to be doing some crazy stuff. It's not that, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those were clear manic showings from both of these people. As I'm a psychologist, like clear manic showings, but it was clear episodes of not being fully stable mentally and maybe going through a little bit of a manic episode, a little bit of a manic breakdown. And it never felt forced. It always felt completely natural for those characters. And I think it was well done and never done in a way where the mental illness felt exploitative, or felt like it was just there as like an after school special type of thing. And also, last thing I'm gonna say, I promise, because I think I'm actually even saying more than I wrote in this little section, is that once these characters were diagnosed with bipolar disorder, give me a second, choose song cider. Once these characters were introduced as being bipolar, it didn't like become their whole character. They still had other interests. It did affect their relationships, obviously, but that is actually quite normal. That's quite obvious it's gonna happen. But it didn't just become their entire character. They weren't just the bipolar guy. They were Eli and Craig, who were writers and musicians and all of that, but also happened to have bipolar disorder. So I thought it was very well done. The next section is going to be a big negative section because originally when I was filming this the first time on my iPhone before it shut down, this was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different bad things. Or no, I'm sorry, 5, because I put 2 of them together. There were 5 different bad things. So let's just put it together, right? So every single section is going to have almost like an unofficial title. The unofficial title for this one is the 1 or 2 episode arcs that always just felt like after school specials. I just said earlier when I was talking about Eli and Craig that something that they did brilliantly is that they never made it just feel like an after school special. But sometimes they really did with other storylines. And when the show gets things right, it gets things excellently chef's kiss right. And when it gets them wrong, sometimes I'm just like, okay, like I feel like I'm getting lectured to almost by people. So let us start with what is, in my opinion, the least worst offender of this 1 or 2 episode arc education after school special pandemic we've got going on in Degrassi. So the least worst offender is Katie's 2 episode eating disorder. So I have this personal guess that when the writers of Degrassi, this is all jokes, by the way. I'm not actually trying to offend these people or be rude like that, but I have I just wonder sometimes, I guess, if the writers or creators of Degrassi just had like a bingo card with all of these serious topical issues, and they were like, haven't done this one yet. What character should it be with? And that's what I feel like sometimes. But to be fair for the writers, at least with Katie, when they introduced the bulimia aspect of her character, she was a new character. It was season 11. She had just been introduced. Was she season 11? Was she season 11? Yes, she was. Was she? Wait a second. Yes, she was. So it was season 11 of the show. And that really took me a second. It was season 11 of the show. And we just been introduced to her. And also, I personally, just side tangent, Katie's character, do love her. But I think she's one of those characters that was introduced with such potential, and then it just really, really disappointed us by the end. But that's neither here nor there. That could be something for a future topic of just in general, characters that disappoint me. But yeah, when she was first introduced, it is the audience is told that she did previously struggle with bulimia, and that was something that she had already been dealing with prior to the show going on, so valid. And it seemed like what we were seeing in season 11 was just her relapsing. So, okay, valid. You don't need to show us the beginnings of it or anything like that. Just show us, you know, the fact that she does have this, and show her relapsing. Okay. And those 2 episodes where that storyline actually happens aren't like bad episodes per se, except for the fact that she forgives Marisol. That's beyond me. But besides that, nothing wrong with them. My problem is that, I mean, Katie isn't on the show for too long. She graduates at the end of season 12 anyways. She's really on the show for only like 2 seasons. But you're telling me that in 2 seasons worth of time, they mention the bulimia once, and then she never relapses, never has a problem with it again. It never really comes up again in any significant way. It almost really just felt like they were like, I mean, we're going to talk about this in like the very next person, but it's almost like they had realized that they did a really bad eating disorder storyline earlier in the show, which we'll talk about in a second. And then they were like, we have to do better. And then they just didn't do better. They did almost exactly the same. And I was like, okay. And with that lead up, I think it should be quite obvious what the next show or the next storyline that I'm going to include in this 1-2 episode arc issue after school special is, which is Emma's 2 episode eating disorder arc that happened at the end of season 5. So, I am like truly not joking when I say that this is one of the storylines that stays in my head the most, just for how ridiculous it kind of is. So the 2-parter, it was titled Our Lips Are Sealed. And it was basically, I believe, if not the finale of season 5, but it was very close to the end of season 5. I believe this was Emma's final real big storyline in season 5. And then the next time we saw her in season 6, you would have never known she had an eating disorder. But like, when, you know how I said with Eli and Craig, it felt like natural that they were suddenly put with this disorder. I cannot say the same for Emma at all whatsoever. And that's not to say that body dysmorphia is only like, there's always signs that you're gonna get it and that you're gonna want to be like starving yourself because of it. That's not true. That's not true at all. Body dysmorphia can come to anyone at any time, but it didn't feel like a natural progression because it basically only started around the halfway to end point of the first episode of the 2-parter. And then for like the first half, or first maybe 2/3 of the second part of Our Lips Are Sealed. And then it was like, over. She's getting help. And she never relapsed. It was never really brought up again. In fact, I'm pretty sure later on in the show, there is a moment, I'm not pretty sure, there is a moment where she is being sponsored by that purple drink. And then she goes naked in front of the school as like this contrarian thing. Because she just loves her body, I guess. She has no problem showing it. But I felt like in this episode, did we not kind of establish she had maybe some body issues because of her eating disorder? But then like give it like 2 seasons later and it's like, fuck it, just gonna show my whole body. And it was never brought up again in any kind of capacity. So this is what I mean this is one of the best examples I can give you of sometimes Degrassi just goes so off the rails in just trying to almost be like educational. It's almost like an educational topical issue bingo card. And they try to make sure that their bingo card, you know, is filled. They win the game, but like at what cost? You know, like truly at what cost? And speaking of what cost, oh, something I do want to say because I wrote it in my notes and I didn't say it. I will say, good job, Miri McDonald, for showing off your acting chops in that episode. Kudos to you, I guess. You get your bag, girl. Anyways, the next one is a fever dream. So the next one, once again, we're still under the 1-2 parters. We're basically gonna be there until I start speaking positively about something. You're just gonna have to assume. I'm gonna stop mentioning it. You're just gonna have to assume that we are still on the 1 episode, 2 episode after school specials. The next one is JT's 2 episode story arc of drug dealing. So let's give some context. So this happened also in season 5. Looking back, maybe season 5 just wasn't good. I don't know. Maybe it's really hard to come back after such a phenomenal 4th season. I don't know. So during Liberty's pregnancy storyline in season 5, this is what I have in my notes here, verbatim, JT wanted to be a good father. He really wanted to take care of them. And I distinctly remember that they moved into a place together and he had a job at a pharmacy with Jay, I believe, but he also could not have been with Jay. I remember Jay being a part of the storyline though. And he basically needs to start making money to prove to Liberty that yes, he can take care of her outside of her parents, because her parents did not approve of any of this. And so reasonably, understandably, and very in character, JT decides that obviously the best option to be able to take care of your girlfriend is to steal how do you say this drug? Steal oxycodone, if that's how you say it, from your pharmacy job in order to illegally sell it and basically drug deal. Understandably, Liberty is pissed about this when she finds out how he really got the money. And she decides basically I'm pretty sure to like leave him. She basically is just like, you know, grow up, kid, please. And so once again, JT does the understandable thing, the responsible thing, a very in character thing. And he decides to overdose on his own stolen oxycodone, because he also loses his job, I'm pretty sure, after they realize he's been stealing drugs. So then he overdoses, because that's very in character for this character. Yeah, and then that's basically the final decision for Liberty to realize that she is going to give this baby up for adoption because these two kids are just too irresponsible to take care of a child. Honestly, best decision, and this theme, this storyline I think is excellent, and this theme will come back later, spoilers, in another storyline, because I think that's a very realistic thing. You know, sometimes you're not 16 and pregnant, teen mom and ready. Sometimes you're really not, and that is okay. And this show really addressed that with Liberty, but it was just the fact that it almost felt like this storyline was done for like 2 reasons. 1, bingo card. 2, is that they needed a reason for Liberty to justify, I suppose, why she was going to give this baby up for adoption, and start this adoption storyline. But like, that could have been done any other way. I feel like Liberty is pretty fairly intelligent. I'm talking like class president level intelligent. I think she could have easily found out that she's not responsible enough for this, but instead they just made JT act out of character. Like, JT's never been the most intelligent lad, but I don't think he's ever been that stupid either to just steal from his job, sell drugs, and then overdose on the drugs. I just doesn't feel like something JT would do, but I don't know, maybe I never knew him. And then our next storyline under this bad tangent, because it's been going on for forever now, that we have, where is it? Where is that? So the next one, yes. Oh, also, I would just like to mention, just last thing, because I'm seeing that I wrote it in my notes. I'm so sorry. I'm not following my notes at all, and it's just a freaking mess. What makes the storyline, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, this is the fine wine, which is excellent, and then the spoiled milk, which is disgusting, expired 10 years ago. Throw it out of your fridge already. It's yellow. What makes this truly spoiled milk is that as Degrassi went on, I think they actually did a better job, that's not a word, more better, but they did a better job at showcasing the actual effects of drug dealing in teenagers in like seasons 11 to 14. Especially with like Zig and all of that, and Tiny. So this just feels really cheap and lazy. Anyways, next one. Speaking of cheap and lazy, I believe this was season 2, but it could also have been another season and it would make no difference. And that's something else that I'm going to mention at the end of all of these, that I'm going to come back to. That's another reason why these are extra spoiled milk. So the next one. Another quickie was, like I said, Degrassi had a grocery list. They needed to cross some items off the list. So what did they do? Toby is taking laxatives. The silence is deafening. So whatever. Toby taking laxatives, sure, cool, I'll believe you. He's doing it not because he wants to shit a lot, but just he wants to lose weight. I'm pretty sure we kind of get the same storyline later on with Jenna. With Jenna's, it's at least played a bit more comical. It's still serious, but it's played a little bit more comical in the embarrassment aspect when she basically like shits her pants. With Toby's, it's played very serious though, so obviously they want us to take it very serious, but I can't take it serious when I am not kidding. I personally, and I am due for a Degrassi rewatch, once I move back home in the end of this year, I do plan, because I have them all on DVD, I do plan on giving it a rewatch, I promise. Well, I have it all on DVD except for season 13 and 14, which I have given up hope those will ever be on DVD. But anyways, yeah, this just felt like, I don't know, like, it's in my memory. They never mentioned it ever again, at least not in any substantial way. So like, I'm not kidding. The storyline could have never happened and it wouldn't have made a single difference. The only good thing is that it's one of Toby's very, very few main character, like A-plot storylines. So good for Toby. Moving on though. My last one in this section, hallelujah, finally, it's been like almost 15 minutes of talking about this, is probably, in my opinion, the reason I saved it for last is because I think it's genuinely the worst of all of these. Worse than Katie's eating disorder, worse than Emma's eating disorder, worse than Toby wanting to take lots of shits, worse than JT ODing over here in a park, and I'm pretty sure it was the ravine, ghetto, is that Peter's two-story meth addiction. When I tell you, this storyline and this episode just lives in my head on replay, So maybe it's actually really good. Maybe it has aged like fine wine because I won't stop thinking about it. But no, I don't think so at all. I think it's really, really bad, and I'm gonna tell you why. There's an extra reason for this one that I didn't really give for the other ones, and that's why it's my last one. So firstly, I would just want to know, literally what I wrote here. I just want to know, what was the decision behind what? What was the decision? Can I speak? Oh my goodness. What was the decision behind having meth be the drug that Peter took? I am not kidding. When this was season 9, I was like 10 or 11 in 2009 when it came out. I could not have told you what meth was at that young age, okay? I was watching Glee. I don't freaking know what meth was. Wait, was I watching Glee 2009? I don't think I started watching it until 2010, so maybe I wasn't watching Glee. But I was still a child. I did not know about meth. I want to know, what was the decision? Was there a huge like teen meth epidemic going on in the United States or in North America and Canada that I didn't know about in 2009? Some crazy shit going on that I didn't know about? Because why choose meth? That, to me, looking back, is such a crazy drug of choice for him to get addicted to. But I guess weed is like not a bad thing. They literally even kind of made weed seem like an okay thing when Spinner had cancer and he was like smoking it. Cocaine has been done in the show before, and I guess they didn't want to like make him do crack, so they thought meth was the best option. I don't know. I just really want to know I would love to sit down and know the creative decision behind having meth be the drug of choice. Also, this moment, I don't know how, and this is where I literally was like, I would like to go ahead and preface this rant by saying that I do appreciate the drug storyline. Like, I'm not a hater of the drug storyline or anything. It just personally felt a little too after school special for me. Oh my god, my camera's dying. My camera's dying. We're back, folks. So yeah, I was continuing here. I just personally felt like it felt almost a little bit too much like an after school special, but I was giving props. I was giving props because Peter's addiction, at the same time, it did feel a little bit like growth, because believe it or not, they do mention this storyline again one more time at the very end almost of like season 9, or maybe it was a few episodes later of season 9. Season 9 was pretty short, so could have been a few episodes later. It could have been the end of the season. It doesn't freaking matter. But there is a moment where Victoria, don't remember who she is, but Victoria, I remember her name, comes and offers Peter meth, and he's like, no, I will not do meth. Character growth, development, love to see it. So I'll give you that. But this is my main reason. Still, like I said, it felt a little too after school, especially for me. It was very much like I was watching one of those disgusting PSAs, especially for my peeps, my American peeps who watched this on Teen Nick or The N, back when it was The N. Teen Nick and The N used to air the most disgusting anti-smoking PSAs. Like, I have a distinct warm memory of this commercial. Before they did the annoying like orange background techno ones that I absolutely hate. They used to be on MTV all the time in like the 2010s. Before those, it would be like a guy or a teenage girl going into a convenience store and like being like, I want this. And then it's like, are you sure? I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's like, are you sure you want this? And then it's like somebody with like something in their like throat because they can't breathe, or like they have like this just disgusting tongue. I don't know. I don't fully remember the commercials.
Pack of cigarettes, please.
It's not enough.
What's a pack of smokes cost? Your teeth. Smoking can cause serious gum disease that makes you more likely to lose them.
See you again.
What are cigarettes costing you?
But I'm sure you guys do. You have to remember these PSAs. But anyways, those anti-smoking PSAs is what this entire episode felt like. Except for instead of being an anti-smoking PSA, it was like, hey kids who don't know what meth is, don't do meth. And I was like, okay. Won't do. So yeah, that's my number one. But then also my biggest number two is that like with the other storylines, to my knowledge, they were not hyped up the way that this storyline was. And that is why it's the highest on my worst list of these after school special episodes, because like, why are y'all hyping up Peter's meth addiction storyline for the season 9 premiere?
This semester's all about me and you, baby. In just 7 days.
What?
Degrassi's season premiere.
You get to decide what happens, huh? What about me?
Is about
Yeah.
to get
Get some help, Peter.
real. New Degrassi, Friday at 8 Eastern, only on Team Nick.
Like at least I remember, because I'm telling you, I watched Teen Nick religiously back then, because I'm pretty sure it was already Teen Nick in 2009, and they would literally like every single commercial break play like 1 or 2 Degrassi commercials. And during the season 9 or before season 9 premiered during the summer, they were like, I mean, they didn't really say this, but they basically were like, Peter's gonna do meth. Watch Degrassi. And it always just felt like they were almost using this addiction storyline that lasted literally 1 hour. Peter's 1 hour addiction. To make me watch season 9. And it just felt ridiculous. It felt ridiculous. I hated it. Yeah, it's definitely the worst of the worst. And this is where I was talking about what I was saying I was going to come back to at the very end. So the takeaway from this entire little, like, really big section, first of all, drugs bad. Don't do drugs. But number 2, all of these episodes, which I have titled the after school episodes, take a shot every time I've said that, good luck, RIP, but they feel really, I should just call them filler episodes, because that's really all they are. And that's why I think they have really aged like spoiled milk. You could take away all of the episodes I have just mentioned from like every season, or even if you don't take away the episodes, keep the episodes, but take away the storylines I mentioned. You could take away those storylines and it would not affect the overall plot of absolutely anything. It would not affect the overall plot of the show progression. It would not affect the overall plot or character development of any of these characters, except for maybe Peter by like 0.1%. It would not affect anything. These are truly like the Degrassi equivalent of filler, but disguising the filler in some kind of topical issue to make it seem more important than it is. And that is why I have now been ranting about this for like an hour now, almost, it feels like. But yeah, I've just never really been a fan of 1 hour long episodes like these. And the more grown up that I've become, it just makes me feel like it's just very not well done, in my opinion. I feel like less thought were put into those 1 or 2 episode storylines than they were into like storylines that lasted multiple seasons, or even 1 long season or something like that, like we'll talk about later. Yeah, I'm just not a fan. Really yucky, yucky, yucky milk. And now finally we can stop being negative for a little bit and talk about our next positive. So our title for this one is going to be the abortion storylines. So for these, I have 2, and for this entire video, you're gonna notice that we are never gonna talk about Degrassi Next Class again throughout this entire video, because I personally have only ever seen all of Degrassi Next Class once when they all came out. The day they came out, I binged them all. That's it. I have not rewatched Degrassi Next Class since they came out, so I personally do not feel like I should include any of those storylines in here, because I don't fully know, one, if the storylines were as good as I remember them being or as bad as I remember them being, or a few years later, have they aged bad? Have they aged well? I don't know. So this is the only storyline from Next Class you're gonna see on here, because this is the one that truly has stuck in the back of my brain. And I think even if I go back and I look now, I think it will have aged well. So first, I'm going to give you a history lesson, and we are gonna talk about our Queen Manny Santos. So obviously we need to start with Manny, obviously. Everybody who is into the Degrassi fandom or knows anything at all, basic knowledge people, accidents will happen part 1 and part 2. This, by the way, is a good example of a 2-part episode. Was brilliantly done. It was brilliantly done. It was iconic. It was the moment back in 2004. So history lesson time. So the original episode was meant to air in 2004 because it was a part of season, it was not a part of season 4. I always confuse it. I almost always say, I'm pretty sure in another video I did the same mistake. It was not season 4. It was actually season 3. The abortion storyline was at the season 3, but it technically was still 2004. And so it originally aired in Canada on January 26, 2004. And then that was part 1. Part 2 was February 9th, 2004, respectively, obviously. And it wouldn't air in the United States until August 26, 2006, more than 2 years later. It's like 2 years and like a few months, almost a full 3 years. And the reason for this is because this was back when I was about to say the CW, that's where my mind's at. This was back when the N was a network. This was before, you know, Teen Nick became the N, basically, or the N became Teen Nick. And I guess since they were the US distributor, I don't know if the network itself was the US distributor, but basically the US distributor did not want to air that episode because in a season that or in a show that at that point in season 3 has had rape, it has had poor Terry getting knocked into a coma, it has had abusive relationships, it has had infidelity, it has had death, because I'm pretty sure at that point Craig's dad had died. All of that. Also, Craig's dad abusing him, no big deal. All of that's okay, but we have to cross the line at teen pregnancy. So they refused to air it. And the only reason it aired is because in 2006, the N was doing their iconic every Degrassi episode ever marathons, which, by the way, that's the first time that I ever saw this episode as well. Maybe not in 2006, because I don't think I was watching this in 2006, but I started watching the show in 2007, and that's when I remember first seeing it, was during an every Degrassi episode ever marathon, because otherwise, how would I have seen it? I didn't own the DVDs at like 10. So it only aired because they were doing I think before they did the every Degrassi episode ever marathon, they were doing like a cast picks event where the cast all picked their favorite episode. And quite obviously, Cassie Steele picked her episode. She picked Accidents Will Happen Part 1 and 2. And so I guess the N was like, well, if Cassie Steele demands it, then we must do it. So they aired the episodes, hurrah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure after that, they were like, okay, whatever. And I definitely remember seeing the episode for the first time during one of those every Degrassi episode marathons, thanks to my grandma's DVR. And I don't think you'll like ever be able to understand this was pretty groundbreaking for television. And I think it's still pretty groundbreaking for media, because I think that, yeah, you have your teen moms, your 16 and pregnants, the masterpiece, Emmy-winning, Golden Globe-nominated Secret Life of the American Teenager. But those are all absolutely ridiculous and silly and disgusting sometimes, a little bit exploitative. But it's rare that you get a really good depiction of teen pregnancy and even better, teen abortion. So Degrassi really did something good with Manny's character and with her storyline. And this is a side note, completely unrelated, but if you are interested in such a thing, I highly recommend watching, I'm pretty sure it was 2020, 2020's movie called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, because it's I think one of those movies. I think Accidents Will Happen Part 1 and 2 is something that everyone should watch, but in case you don't want to watch the 3rd season of like a 14 season show, then I recommend that movie. And I almost feel like it's an educational movie, like education done well. I think every single adult and teenager, and maybe not child, but every adult and teenager should watch that, because I think it does abortion so well and talks about such real topical issues. Anyways, let's talk about my number one favorite personal thing is about how this pregnancy kind of removes some of the stigma I felt like that pregnancies typically have in society. I would like to preface that by saying I don't hold my own personal beliefs or prejudices against young girls who get pregnant, because who am I to blame them? Who am I to do that? That's shitty. But society doesn't care. Society's like, yeah, let's hate on teen girls, and then teen girls who get pregnant, sluts. But Manny is not. Number one is that she literally only ever had sex with Craig because she loved him and she wanted to be with him. And that's like the only guy she had sex with at that point. And then she got pregnant, unfortunately, with his child. And then also there's like a stigma that, oh, you got pregnant when you were 16, 15. I'm pretty sure Manny was 14 when she got pregnant. Crazy stuff. There's always a stigma of like, oh, they come from bad families, they're like trash, but like, no. I mean, Manny definitely had her issues with her father, but I don't think you could really title him like a trash father or anything. I don't think that he was like a bad guy. I think she came from a good family with a good mom and a good dad, and they raised her well. She just made this mistake because she was in love with this guy, and I think that's pretty groundbreaking. I think it's a little bit breaking the stigma around teen pregnancies. And then of course, the biggest groundbreaking thing is breaking the stigma around abortions. Because I think what's so well done about it is that like Spike helps her and like, you know, tells her more information about it, and like gives her a bit of guidance. You know, this is the same adult who was herself pregnant when she was a teenager, and I think she just gave such like good advice, and it was something that I feel like it's truly the reason I think that it's not in the same category as the last category that I just spent like 15 minutes on, is that it is not a topical issue that has lost its relevance, or it's not a topical issue that has almost been resolved or isn't as big of an issue anymore. Like, I'm sorry, I never knew a single teenager in high school doing meth personally. At least not in my Polk County, Florida school. But like abortion, that's some real deal stuff. I did know tons of girls who were pregnant in high school. That was a real issue. So I personally just think it was really groundbreaking for its time. And what makes it, you know, age like wine and not milk is that it's still relevant, I think, even today. And all of that, I'm gonna shut up, I promise, is to lead into Lola? Who the hell? To Lola, because Manny's storyline might have been groundbreaking, but it was also 2004, lest we forget. So it was definitely brought up again in certain instances, although there also are certain times where I feel like it could have been brought up more, that she once was pregnant with Craig's child. But it basically was like a blink and you'll miss it kind of event where she was pregnant and then she wasn't pregnant, and then that was like it. But on the other hand, with Lola, what happened is that we definitely got like a more in-depth look into teen abortion. I mean, we saw her not just even like blink and you'll miss it, she went to the clinic end of episode. It was more like she went to the clinic. We saw her in the procedural room. We saw her talking to the doctors. We saw the doctors giving their medical talks about what the procedure will be like. And that was truly some groundbreaking shit, but I feel like maybe probably not talked about as much because at that point, Next Class aired exclusively, at least in the United States, I'm pretty sure on Netflix. I think it was still airing in Canada on television, cable networks, but in terms of the US distributor was Netflix at that point. I highly doubt Netflix, who's doing out here 13 Reasons Why, really cares if one of their teen characters has an abortion or not. So yeah, it definitely went more in depth, but I feel like it's less talked about because it's not as iconic as all of the backlash, I guess, and controversy around Accidents Will Happen Part 1 and 2, which at this point came out like 18 years ago. Crazy. And yeah, it's just, I think it's very well done, Lola's episode. I'm telling you, it's one of the only Next Class things, well, one of a few moments from Next Class that really stuck with me. And I really want to give that show a rewatch. I would actually love to give that show a rewatch and really go a bit more in-depth and analysis on it. But yeah, I think both of these storylines are both equally groundbreaking just in their own way. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Go watch Never... Is it Never Maybe Sometimes Always or Never Rarely Sometimes Always? I think it might be Never Maybe Sometimes Always. Who the hell cares? Go watch the movie. There's not that many movies that are named like that, so you can type it in wrong and you're still gonna get the right result. So, now let's talk some shit again. The next part of this video, it's actually quite small, so I shouldn't be talking about it for too long unless I go off on another like side tangent, is, I'm kidding you not, I put it in all caps. This entire section is called All of the College Seasons, Oh My Effing God. So, when I say all of the college seasons, I mean all of them. And for the purposes of this video, I actually did go back and do a little bit of research on some of these because, I mean, my knowledge is not like 100. It's not perfect. I'm perfect. Don't get that twisted, but my knowledge isn't always. So I did go back and do research on just some of these a little bit. I did not even bother with the college seasons. I did not want to put myself through that. I don't think anyone should put themselves through that. So yeah, let's talk about Degrassi, the college years. So they're a very dark, very repressed memory, and they come in two parts. We obviously have the first batch of graduates who graduated in season 5, but for some reason stuck around until Degrassi Goes Hollywood, which is Paige, Ellie, Marco. Like, do not get me wrong, I love Paige, I love Ellie, I love Marco, but I didn't want to see them after Degrassi. And then we have part 2, which was, of course, Emma, Manny, Liberty. Do I love all 3 of these girls? Yes, I do. Never had to see them again. I would have been fine. Cause like, you know, I personally felt like the reception for the part 1s weren't that good, for Ellie and for Paige and for Marco weren't that good. So it really baffles me how they were like, yeah, we don't really know what to do with these characters. It's quite obvious in my opinion. And it doesn't seem like too many people really care or like these storylines, but let's do it again. Let's do it with Liberty, Manny, and Emma this time. And my biggest gripe, if you will, like you say, gripe. My biggest thing is that because we had to follow Manny, Emma, and Liberty, that also means that we all had to meet the Wonder Bread spokesman, Kelly. I couldn't tell you a single characteristic about him. He rides bikes, I believe. He introduced Emma to weed, I believe. They dated, I believe. And then he fell off the face of the planet, as he should have. Truly, meeting him, I could have gone my entire life without it. Nothing against this actor. Absolutely nothing against this actor. I don't know him like that. But I didn't want to know his character like that either. So, yeah. I think just for Kelly alone, this could be warranted as being one of the worst things of Degrassi. But yeah, I just like, I've said before that, I don't remember where I read this in the fandom at the time, but I either read it on Twitter, on Degrassi Twitter, or I read this in Degrassi blog, or maybe somewhere else on YouTube back in the day. But I remember basically someone saying something along the lines of, the show is only ever good when it's set in Degrassi, because even though this is an ensemble cast of multiple different characters. It's like a whole myriad of different characters. The only characters that matter are Degrassi, or the only character that matters is Degrassi. So once you take the Degrassi aspect out of the show, it literally does not matter. And that's exactly how I feel. Like, it's different when at least that person is still Degrassi adjacent, like think Spinner still being in the show. In seasons 8 and 9, I didn't mind it because he was working at the Dodd. He was dating Jane. He was Degrassi adjacent. You would still see him hanging around, but like, could not have cared less about what happened at like Smithdale University. Like, I could not have cared less. And now we have to start another really long rant. I'm so sorry. This video is going to be like maybe 2 hours, but let's go. We need to talk about the storylines of Degrassi that have aged like fine wine. And let me tell you right now, it is the assault storylines. And there are 3 categories here. We are going to start with what is, in my opinion, maybe the weakest of the 3. And then we have our 2 and our 1, which I did put it in order. So I really do believe that the last one is the best assault storyline told in Degrassi. It might be an unpopular opinion, but let's find out. So number 1, I think it should be quite obvious, is Darcy. When I say assault, I'm specifically referring to the assaults of like Darcy, Paige, and Zoe. And I do think Darcy's is the weakest. Well, I will give credit where credit is due, and I want to talk about the good first, which is just how tragic this storyline is and how it was so well executed in terms of like, especially in contrast, like Zoe obviously hadn't even been introduced yet at all or even like thought of, but Paige had, and she already had her like assault storyline. And the fact that the show was able to fit 2 of them in the first like few seasons and make both of them feel extremely unique was very fresh to me. It was very well done. Darcy's was different from the other 2 in that she never found out who her assailant was because he was a serial date rapist. And basically she was at this party. She left her drink alone for a second because it's 2007. I think it was 2006. And I guess nobody knew any better, unfortunately. Although at the same time, you know, people just shouldn't be drugging your drinks. But they drugged her drink, she got raped, and she never got to find out even who, or even really identify him. Because like I said, it was just like a serial rapist, basically. It wasn't even a date rapist. A date rapist, I'm pretty sure, is when you are on a date and then you're raped. Or maybe it's not, and that's just what it sounds like. But yeah, she got assaulted by someone she never like got to really identify, and he just did this to multiple different young women at parties. And that in itself is so sad and so like heartbreaking, and I will give so much props to that. Like I said, this, even though I think it's the weakest of the 3, I think it's still really aged well and very well done, because sometimes unfortunately you don't get the justice that you really want or deserve, and not even for reasons like we'll talk about later, but really just for reasons of terms of like, sometimes you might not even know who you've been victimized by. You don't even know who's hurt you, and that is really sad and also very scary. I think it's one of my top fears. And I would like to mention, this was during a time in Degrassi where I felt like a lot of Degrassi storylines were 1 episode, 2 episode things, like I mentioned earlier, and then never mentioned again, but they didn't go that route with Darcy, and I very much appreciated that. She basically spent all of season 7, I think it was season 7. She basically spent all of season 7 working through this trauma, and it is not something that just like went away after 1 episode or 2. She quite literally spent the whole season with it. If I remember correctly, they introduced it in the season 7 premiere, so it was like right from the get-go, like you knew exactly what had happened to her. Unfortunately, we as the audience kind of knew, even though she did not. And we saw how it affected her long term, but also more importantly, in my opinion, how it affects other people around her, because she hurt a lot of people through this process as well. And the bathroom shower scene where she tries to kill herself, and I'm pretty sure it's Dancing in the Dark Part 2, which is the second part of the premiere episode. She tries to kill herself by like slitting her wrist in the bathroom. That scene, just tragic. I'm never gonna forget it. It's like embedded in my brain. I can't get it out of my head. It stayed with me. And I would honestly have loved to have seen more of it. I think that would maybe have made me feel more for the storyline. I would have loved to see more of it, but obviously Shanae Grimes had things she wanted to do in Beverly Hills. So she left us, and we never really got anything after season 7 was over, which is kind of okay because season 7 did end with her working towards getting closure over this, or not necessarily closure, just trying to do better for herself. So we did get a little bit of closure, which was nice. But now it is time to discuss what is, in my opinion, the second best assault storyline. And this is where we might get into some unpopular opinion time. I'm not sure. But the second best assault storyline is Paige's. And hear me out. I'm going to explain exactly why I believe this. And this will also be a trend that you see throughout 2 more of these things, these good, you know, fine wine things. So Paige's storyline is very different from Darcy's because she very much well knows who, you know, who raped her. And I do want to break it down a little bit just because I do think, I mean, if you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you know Degrassi anyway, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I do think that sometimes we really need to remember, like, this storyline was done so freaking well because I think we never knew who really raped Darcy. We did know who raped Paige, and it was heartbreaking because I think it was a very similar, like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the movie Speak, except for maybe not as, in my opinion, not as well done as Speak. I think Speak is actually a really well done movie. Plus I love Kristen Stewart. Book's also great. And it kind of has that thing of like, you can take away consent at any time. And that's okay. And that's valid. And that person has to respect your decision because otherwise it's not consensual anymore. And with Paige's storyline, we really saw that. And we also saw the really serious victim blaming that gets done when young girls get raped. Because if I remember correctly, because I recently only saw season 2, I rewatched it pretty recently. From what I remember, we all know she was flirting with Dean heavily before everything happened. She clearly was interested in him. She clearly wanted to like be with him maybe. And she did go to the party, I'm pretty sure, dressed in like a quote-unquote promiscuous outfit. She was trying to be flirty and fun. She was wearing some heels, I'm pretty sure. And she did 100%. She asked him if he knew anywhere more private that they could go. However, whenever they did go somewhere more private, whenever they were making out, it was fine. It was fine. She was consenting to it. She was okay with this. Once it moved on to more serious things and she no longer wanted to be doing that, that should have been the end of the conversation. That should have been it. He should have been like, oh, I understand. That should have been the end of the conversation. But instead, that is not what happened. And of course, she was silenced basically. And it's very, very hard scene, in my opinion, to watch. But yeah, I think, like I said, what makes the storyline so great is, one, the victim blaming, because it's basically like, oh, I mean, you were leading him on, you were flirting with him, you were, you know, you wanted to be with him, so what are you talking about? Like, shut the hell up. And then 2, well, this is actually something I wrote unrelated really, but I just want you to know that the actor who plays Dean does a really excellent job at making me hate him. Kudos to that guy. And then number 3, and this is my main important thing, it doesn't go away. This could be labeled as a 2-part episode, except for it's not. It comes back in season 4. She has some serious long-term trauma, even 2 years later, from this rape, as one would. She ends up going to trial in season 4 for this rape, as she should. And then, of course, it is one of the most heartbreaking moments in all of the show, and of course it happens in season 4, the best season. It is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire show when she's at her trial in season 4 and the not guilty verdict is read. Like, even the defense lawyer was like, her face was like, this don't feel right. I'm like, yeah, no, it don't feel right. You know what Dean did. You know what your defendant did. But that's the whole thing. You blame the victim, and you don't blame the people who actually do the crimes. It is genuinely a very realistic, very grim take, and very well done. But because saying all that praise, I do now want to talk about the number one, in my opinion, assault storyline in all 14 seasons of Degrassi. And the reason I think it's number one is the fact that this one was not a rape. It was an assault. It was an actual assault, and I'll explain it. Well, I'm not going to explain it in a second, but it wasn't a rape because there was no penetration, but it was disgusting. It was assault. It was sexual assault. And what makes it so excellent is a trend that you're going to notice later on in the video. I say that while I'm like an hour in, of it comes back, but not only does it come back, it affects a myriad of different people. And that's what I love so much about it. So let us start with my notes here, and then we can move on to another good thing, because like I told you, this video is going to be a little weird because the editing's a little weird because I didn't fully edit this Google Doc before I came here, because who the hell cares? But the next thing will be another good thing. But anyway, Zoe. So Zoe's sexual assault story, my thing just like went berserk. Zoe's sexual assault storyline was in season 13, and in something that I thought was actually a really, really clever callback is that the episode where we find out that she was sexually assaulted, it's called Unbelievable, while the episode where she goes to court for it is actually called Believe, which I thought was a pretty cool callback. Yeah, I wanted to mention that. I thought it was really cool, you know, because it's like, oh, I can't believe this unbelievable thing happened. And then by the time at the end of the season, when it comes to the court trial, it's like, no, believe me, because this did happen. But anyways, so her storyline is, in my opinion, the best one that they did of all the three. Number one is the amount of foreshadowing. I think that Darcy's had absolutely no foreshadowing at all. It was really just this really sudden thing, and that's okay too. Sometimes it just happens. And you're just thrusted into that. With Paige, there wasn't necessarily foreshadowing except for one conversation she had at the party beforehand. But besides that, it didn't feel like it was gonna go wrong, or maybe it did because everything was going almost too right. But with Zoe, what's so cool about it is in the episode right before Unbelievable, it's almost like Degrassi did like a little Where's Waldo kind of episode with their previous episode before that called Basket Case. Because what they did is that there was this huge party at Miles's house, and Zoe was there, and this is like freshly broken up with Drew, Zoe, who has like nobody at this point really, and so she is drinking hard, my girl. My girl is partying, and she's getting blackout drunk, she's getting sloppy drunk, she's trying to make out with Miles. Like it's truly like a Where's Waldo trying to spot Zoe in the background or the transition scene of an episode. It's quite cute. Well, not quite cute because of what happens next, but I love Zoe. And then, of course, like I said, she tried to hook up with Miles. That did not happen, thankfully, because Winston was there. Winston Choo Choo was there to fix it. But I'm not going to blame the two guys for this, because I don't think they did this with bad intentions or anything at all. But they definitely, what they did is they decided to leave Chloe, who the hell is Chloe? They decided to leave Zoe in the pool house, Miles's pool house, just to sober up, because she was like super blackout drunk and it was dangerous for her, which valid. That's a good thing to do, in my opinion, get her away from the party. But what they should have done at least one other time, is checked up on her. That's number one. Or if you don't want to check up on her because you're busy, lock the door to the pool house. Whatever. I'm not going to blame them. They're like two 15-year-olds, but like, come on. So they leave her at the pool house. Then she wakes up the next morning, which is the next episode, Unbelievable. And she knows she got like super blackout drunk, and she knows she feels kind of gross and icky. And she wakes up and like her bikini is basically like untied, and she has no recollection of anything that really happened. And then of course the rest of the episode is her pacing together what happened, but also Becky pacing together would happen. And that to me is where this storyline absolutely excels. Because it does some of the same things of like the victim blaming that Paige's storyline had. We see it here as well, right? Zoe's a slut. Zoe was drunk. And to make matters even worse, Zoe had already lied earlier that season about being raped by Drew, so it just didn't look good for her. But what really, in my opinion, makes this the best one is not just her storyline per se and how it affected her, but also her storyline and how her storyline affected other people, specifically, what's it called? Well, first of all, Maya and Miles basically break up because of this later on, but who literally cares about that? But more importantly, it affects Becky's storyline because one of the things that was so, I guess you could say groundbreaking, kind of, is that Luke, which is one of the main characters of the show and also a literal walking piece of dumpster fire, just walking around the streets, he's the one who raped Zoe. Not raped, he sexually assaulted Zoe. He was one of the two guys. And for me, effective storytelling, and this is my own personal opinion because who the hell am I except for a 20-something-year-old sitting on my floor talking about TV shows. I believe that effective storytelling requires, especially effective storytelling for a show like this with a different huge cast of episodes, like a huge cast of people that kind of all belong to different cliques. You need to be able to tell a story that affects everyone, if that makes sense. Or at least something that, like, I think really masterly intertwines a single plot line or a single storyline with all of the characters. Degrassi is usually at its best when it does that, and we'll talk about that in like the next one and the next thing I'm going to talk about. And this was one of those moments because Becky, who's Luke's brother and another main character, having to come to terms with how her entire life is about to change because of the stupid fucking decision that her brother did is literally so heartbreaking. It's probably the only time I ever felt any sympathy or empathy for that character because I'm not a big Becky fan. But let me tell you, after this, I felt nothing but sympathy for her because the way her family turned on her because she did the right thing is baffling to me, but also so realistic for Christian families like that. They're gonna stick by their shitty son no matter what, even if he does shitty things. So truly, we got to see not only how it affected Zoe long term, but also how it affected Becky. And I think we actually got to see how it affected Becky even more than how it affected Zoe in terms of long-term consequences, because Becky never really was able to rebuild that relationship with her family from what I remember. And it's really heartbreaking. Because also, of course, one of the things that makes this this specific storyline, and this is what I'm going to end it with, what makes this specific storyline different from the other two is that when Zoe goes to court, she actually wins. And it's one of the most glorious moments of TV for me when you see Luke just ready to go to jail, that piece of ass. And then at the same time, you can't help but just also feel glorious and amazing in that moment for Zoe, but also feel complete dread for what is about to happen to Becky because she testified against her own brother basically, and now her brother's gonna get put away to jail because of his stupid actions and her family hates her. It's a really complex moment, and that is excellent storytelling. Fine wine from the grapes of Napa Valley. Love it. The next one's gonna be short, even though this is another positive one. It's gonna be short because if you watched my last video, if you've already seen it, and if you haven't watched it, watch it. I'm not gonna repeat it again. So yeah, not too much to say. The title for this one is literally Cam's Suicide. It's basically excellent for all the reasons that I just mentioned in terms of intertwining different storylines with characters that aren't even related. I mentioned in that video, I'm pretty sure, how Zig, we see how it affects him when he didn't even like Cam. We see how it affects Maya, that his girlfriend. We see how it affects Allie and Dallas. Dallas, who kind of felt like guilty for it, and Allie, who felt like she bonded with Cam a little bit for a little moment, as well as how it affected Eli, who had never even talked to Cam, but he was just unfortunately the one to find the body. We see with all these characters how it affects them. And it's really brilliantly done from all different like grades and cliques and everything. The only thing I don't think I really mentioned before was just truly how the consequences never go away. There were two moments from the top of my head that I can think about. One of them is from Next Class, so I guess this will actually be my final Next Class mention. But number one, in season 13, I remember like a kind of a throwaway line where Maya said something along the lines of, I don't want to date a guy who scares me, not again. And she's talking to Miles in this case because she's saying like Miles is scaring her in this moment. But that little addition of not again just breaks my heart because it's an obvious reference to Cam. She doesn't want to date someone who scares her again, kind of like Cam did, and Cam killed himself, of course. And then, of course, we see it again in Maya's senior year because when Maya and Cam dated, it was her freshman year of high school. And then so much happened to her in the next preceding seasons that sometimes I think we forget that even though like 5 bajillion years have happened in real life, it's really just been the beginning and end of high school for this girl. And really, it wasn't like it was like the beginning and the end because she dated Cam and he killed himself towards the end of her freshman year. And this kind of breakdown that she kind of had after the bus ride accident and then remembering Cam's suicide as well kind of happened in the beginning of her senior year, I believe, or at the end of her junior year, actually, one of the two. I'm telling you, I need to rewatch Next Class. And so it still affects her and she brings it up and I really, really appreciate that. That is, you know, long-term consequences and we love to see it. Overall, the way that I personally rate it is that I think it's probably the second best storyline in the entire show. It is not number one only because number one is like iconic. So the next thing is we're going back to some bad things. It's been a while since we talked about some bad things. This one's kind of short, and the reason it's kind of short is only because I mentioned this in my Degrassi character tier ranking video, but I don't feel like the person most apt to be having this conversation. So I don't want to go too in depth into it, but I do think it needs to be mentioned. And so the title for this next spoiled milk section is going to be called Hazel's Only Solo Episode. So JT's drug dealing storyline was a fever dream, but I think this one is even more so in that this shit was wild looking back. So, like first, let us just get out of the way that Andrea Lewis probably deserved, no, not probably, Andrea Lewis deserved much better than the treatment and storylines that she got on this show. She was one of those characters that like after season 5, it was like, oops, sayonara, you're not one of the important ones, you're not white. So it just kind of felt like she was just kind of discarded. And then on top of that, when she was in the show, I feel like either the writers were sabotaging her or something because they just want her to have no personality. They didn't want us to like her. And as a result, I didn't like her because how was I supposed to? They gave her no characteristics of a real human being. Her only personality is Paige's sidekick or Jimmy's girlfriend. Name one other characteristic or quality besides the one that we're about to talk about from right now, and you can give me nothing. So, like I said, she only had one solo episode. That's literally the title of this little part. And it's a storyline that I do appreciate, and I wrote down here, I appreciate the struggling to come to terms with her ethnic heritage. That's probably some real ass stuff. The original episode aired in 2002. It was called Don't Believe the Hype, and it was only a little bit after 9/11, technically, really only like 1 year after 9/11, where xenophobia was probably at an all-time high. Therefore, like Hazel pretending to be Jamaican instead of from Somalia, like I can't really like be like, oh, so yucky, I can't believe she would do that. Like, no, I do. She's a teenager who's popular and wants to fit in and keep being popular, so yeah, she's gonna lie about being from Jamaica because Jamaica's cool, Jamaica's black, right? Not my words. Jamaica's cool, right? Jamaica's urban, but Somalia, Muslim, you're a terrorist. But my problem with this storyline is just that I hate that when Hazel gets any form of spotlight or any real storyline, it is for the sole purpose of a struggling with her identity storyline. And then after that, it's like, you did your part, and now bow down, goodbye, never see you again, really. And this is something that I don't like for 2 reasons. And it's very, very yucky spoiled milk for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's lazy. It's really lazy to actually bring up a good storyline, because I think this was a well done storyline. But in the context, looking back of the entire show, it is horrible, because how are you going to bring up a good storyline like this, a good cultural identity issue like this, and then never have it play part in their character absolutely ever again? That is lazy. That is weak. Do better. The show acts like Hazel's little PPT presentation out here talking about the real me suddenly fixed xenophobia, and it was all better. We all sang together, holding hands, singing Kumbaya. And the second thing that I think is really why I hate this is not even really my own formed opinion. It's opinions that I have formed from other creators who are actually Black. Crazy, right? Because I am not Black. Who would have guessed? So there seems to be a general sentiment amongst some of the creators that I watch that like people, like Black people, are really fucking tired of like trauma porn, and they're really tired of their issues only being able to be portrayed on screen if it's something to do with kind of like this, kind of like suffering or identity crisis, or in, you know, very extreme cases that are unrelated to this, but like, you know, slavery films, white savior films, etc. Black people seem to be really freaking tired of it, and valid enough. As someone who is not Black, but I am Hispanic, it is really tiring to see representation always be very stagnant and stale and always the same, while white people can have good rep, bad rep, silly rep, crazy rep, all the kinds of representation that they want, and they have that liberty, while minority groups, but also especially Black people, let's be honest, don't have the ability to have shows where Black people can just be normal and happy. And they don't have to have these serious struggling issues all of the time. Like, life isn't The Wire 24/7, people, okay? Some people just live pretty mundane lives. So it's unfortunate, looking back in retrospect, that the only storyline that Hazel had that was an A-plot was actually a good episode about this cultural identity kind of issue, and then she was completely discarded and put into the wayside because she had, I don't know, filled her purpose. It almost felt a little bit like icky when Degrassi was making that episode about how Liberty was going to get accepted into that sorority because she was only Black, because that's sometimes what it feels like with the Black actors in the show. Not always, but especially with like Andrea Lewis, it almost felt like they needed a quota. They were like, we need a Black character, so who are gonna be? And then they did what they did. And I just think it's lazy. And I don't think it's fair that all of the white characters in the story get infinite amount of storylines, whether they're good or bad. So many of these storylines sometimes, like I said, are all bad, right? Like with Emma's or Katie's, but one of the few Black characters really only gets one storyline that's actually decent, and then nothing ever again. And for that alone, I think it's very icky. And I would also just like to say that I don't think that means that this show is like blatantly racist or anything, please. It is baffling to me that this show is very, very white and really underrepresents its Black characters and other minority groups, really. But I've said before, like I said, this is not the conversation for me to be having. I guess I kind of just have the conversation, but I also would just like to say I'm never trying to like speak over anybody in these issues. Like, if you ever feel differently about this, that's okay, and that opinion is so valid. But at the same time, like, let's say that like you don't feel that the show has this issue. That shouldn't also mean that you invalidate other people who do find serious issue with this. You don't have to agree with me, but just be respectful, not because it's me, but just because I myself am trying to take what I hear from other creators who are actually Black and then utilize that to form my own opinion about something after as well seeing it almost for myself. I'm not just like also taking things at face value. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm not trying to accuse the show of being racist. I don't think anyone behind the show is like blatantly racist or anything of that sort, but I do think that this is an issue, and we can't just ignore it because it's one of my favorite shows. That's ridiculous. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is a good thing. A less serious issue that's actually still really serious, but not as serious as that. So the title for this one is called Casey and Jenna's Baby Tyson Storyline and Eventually Having to Give Him Up for Adoption. I mean, just with that alone, I feel like I could end this. It's pretty self-explanatory what I'm gonna talk about. But yeah, I hated the pairing to begin with. I said that before in a previous video. If you had asked me in like season 9, I would have put them in like a worst pairing, but they actually grew on me. And by the time of season 11, I really started to care about them. And I think they were actually one of the strongest storylines in season 11. I felt like season 11 was the weakest link of the later seasons, just because I think sometimes it was a little too over the top and too dramatic. It almost like lost the plot of the story sometimes. I was like, what is happening at this point? But I do think theirs was one of the best ones, and I'm going to tell you why. So from season 10, the two of them really seemed like they were going to try to work hard together to be teen parents. They had support from Casey's mom, newly recovered. And it seemed like things were going to go good. But at the end of the day, they were just 16-year-olds. And so I do like that, unlike with like Liberty and JT, where they knew from the start they were, well, not from the start, but they basically knew from the start they were going to give it up for adoption. With Casey and Jenna, you genuinely saw them try for most of season 11A to try to be parents, try to be in this relationship together. And unfortunately, it just didn't work. And everything that could go wrong, you know, went wrong. And they ended up realizing that the best decision they could do for this child is give it a better childhood, give it a better life than what two 16-year-olds who are under-equipped to take care of a child would be able to give them. And also, unrelated, but in Lose Yourself Part 2, I am not kidding when I tell you that I have never rewinded a scene in Degrassi as much as I did when Jenna, or never have I rewinded a scene as much as I have than when Jenna hit Casey with her freaking guitar.
God forbid you put your guitar down for 2 seconds.
I believe that that scene should be projected onto national museums, okay, around Canada. I'm talking everywhere. I'm talking Ontario. I'm talking wherever in the hell, British Columbia, Vancouver over here. It should be projected everywhere, okay? Montreal, put it everywhere. It's a masterpiece. But anyways, after she hits it with a guitar and they come to that decision, give me a second. Oh my God, my camera. So it turns out my camera has not been dying. It just doesn't want to record any more than 24-minute videos at a time. So yeah, if you see constant splits, that is why. Ooh, good quality cameras. So after 2 episodes after she goes full on Carrie Underwood and hits him with the guitar, it is the iconic Extraordinary Machine Part 2 episode. Eli is having his monologue that I could quote to you off the top of my head if you asked me to. And Casey and Jenna are giving Tyson up for adoption. And I'm not kidding you, like, saddest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Not really, but it was probably the saddest thing in the whole season 11A. And what makes this storyline, like, fine wine is that unlike with Liberty and JT's adoption, where basically post-birth the two of them just give the baby up, in this one we really do see them struggle and try to be the best parents that they can for this young newborn. But that makes it even more sad when they realize that they can't, and that what would be best for Tyson is just a different family altogether. So yeah, excellent, very sad. The next thing, this is actually the, oh my God, guys, maybe this won't be 2 hours. This is actually the last bad thing. And then after the last bad thing, I'm gonna end it with probably the longest talk of all. And it's gonna be positive, I promise. It's gonna be absolutely positive. But first, before we talk about what is, in my opinion, the #1 storyline in Degrassi, and honestly, at this point, please, you should know what it's gonna be. I even foreshadowed it in one of my like very first couple videos. I said that one day I could make an entire video talking about the next, you know, the best storyline of the show. And I will. In this video. I will not make an entire video about it, but I will spend at least like 20 minutes talking about it in this video. So let's start with the biggest dumpster fire that Degrassi has ever done. And this is the best proof I can give you, people, that the main character of the show is Degrassi, not the characters. I am not kidding. The next part is all about, it's titled, All of Season 13A. Look at my beautiful Harry Potter books, so sexy. For anyone who has seen Degrassi, I don't even feel like I need to explain a single thing. I really don't. I feel like I could just say all of season 13A and you would be like, understood, continue. But that's not the kind of video we're doing. So I will talk about it in length. Let us begin. So, like I said, I foreshadowed this earlier when I was talking about the really forgettable college years, but the main character of this show is the queen, the legend, the icon, the moment, Degrassi Community School. So when you take her away, as they did with season 13A for the most part, it's a big dumpster fire, a big mistake. So this is one of the only times I believe, except for maybe the first 2 episodes of like the very first season, that show the kids not in school technically. It's like summer. Because the first 2 seasons of season 1 do show a summer break because school hasn't started yet. It's going to start in the next episode. But I think season 13A is the only other time we get a summer break. And, you know, actually watching it, you know, it's one of those things that like you think you want, but then once you have it, you're like, actually, you can keep it. And that's exactly how I feel. So first, I am positive that in the 9th circle of hell, all they make you do is just watch all of the Paris storylines from season 13A. I am like convinced, and they're on a constant loop. There is no chance for breaks, and every time that Leo is on screen, you have to go like Clockwork Orange. Like how, you know, in Clockwork Orange, they open his eye like this, like it's ready for laser eye surgery, and his eyes just open and he can't blink and he can't close his eyes. That is literally the 9th circle of hell, but it's the Paris storylines, and specifically when Leo is on screen. So I'm so dramatic, but I don't care. The only good thing about season 13A, hands down, is the introduction of Zoe. Miles, okay. Winston, okay. Y'all hear some? Okay. All that really matters is Zoe. But anyways, let us start with the forgettable, because we have the forgettable and then we have the straight up horrible. I think it should be quite obvious what I believe the straight up horrible is. But the forgettable, here we go. Literally, I am not kidding, anything to do with Maya or Tristan or Miles, because sometimes I really be forgetting that Maya and Miles even dated. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm pretty sure I ranked them as one of my favorite pairings in one of my Degrassi videos, because I do ship them, but sometimes I really do be forgetting. So, yeah, anything with Maya or Tristan or Miles is literally like, it feels almost like filler, like a big fever dream looking back at it, because they change so much later on as characters that I sometimes forget how they even were in the Paris like season, because their relationships later on just truly overshadow anything that happened in Paris, truly. Now, for the straight up horrible, I am not going to be explaining it any further. All I am going to say is Allie and Leo. That is all you need to know. And if you want to know any more, go watch my top 10 worst Degrassi The Next Generation couples. Have fun. But moving on to some other stuff that were neither straight up horrible or forgettable, but were just like, So, Claire's summer storyline was, in my opinion, very out of place. Like, first of all, let us talk about, side tangent, let's talk about how y'all need to stop. Well, first of all, y'all did stop, but y'all needed to have stopped putting Claire through so much. Please explain to me why in the span of one high school, like, if one entire high school experience, only 4 years, my girl out here got cheated on, dated her stepbrother basically, had a guy crash a car for her, had cancer, got pregnant, had a miscarriage, got sexually harassed by her boss. Tell me why all of that happened in 4 years. Tell me why. Tell me why. Like please tell me why. That was crazy. Y'all put her through too much. But yeah, Claire's summer storyline was honestly just a drag for me. Like, sorry, but everything in season 13A felt like light and fun. Like, ooh, Paris. I mean, yes, Allie was getting abused, but like besides that, like, ooh, Paris. And then Adam and Drew's storylines until the very end were pretty light. And then all of a sudden it's like, Claire has cancer. Like, you would go from this light scene and then like, Claire has cancer. Light scene, Claire is crying. And it's like, oh my God. It just like wasn't a good time to watch. And that storyline was bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. That she got cancer, then followed by a pregnancy, then followed by a miscarriage. Like, she could not rest. So my camera actually died that time. This video is going to be shorter than I thought it would be, but let's also try to wrap it up quickly with the next 2 things I have left, because otherwise my camera will probably die again. So I was talking about Claire's storyline being a drag. Also, Becky being gone for all of season 13A because she went to Florida. Ridiculous. Like, I hardly cared about Becky in season 12, personal opinion. I felt like her character in season 12 was weak, and then you expect me to care about her or care about her and Adam's relationship when you basically ship her off for a whole season until the very end. And then there's the losers who stay behind, like Adam, Imogen, Drew. Technically, you would think their storylines would be, I mean, their storylines were probably the best that season because they were Degrassi adjacent. But also, like, it's so late. At the same time, I couldn't care less. I really could not have cared less. I don't remember a single storyline from season 13A from those specific group of people, except for the big storyline, which we'll get to. So, yeah, overall, I mean, obviously, like, we're never gonna know behind the scenes stuff of what really happened, and it's really none of our goddamn business. But to me, I think one of the biggest reasons, whether this was intentional or unintentional, season 13A felt half-assed. Like, it felt like something didn't add up by the end. Here's my little theory, because like I said, we're never gonna know what happened backstage, officially backstage. Is this a play? Behind the scenes, we're never gonna know what happens, but obviously we all know Jordan Todesy left the show after season 13A. But this is where I'm stuck, because they either found out about that departure halfway into filming this new season, or they knew about it since season 13 started. And if it's the latter option, my mind is blown because I don't understand Degrassi's logic. And if it's the former, then I don't blame them because they really had no time to prepare. So I would love to sit down and talk to someone. I don't even need to know why Jordan left. Just tell me, did you know about it from the beginning of season 13 or did you not? Because if they knew about it from the beginning, I'm sorry, but if your intention from the beginning was always knowing that Adam's storyline was going to have to end at the end of season 13A with a really tragic death, then that to me somehow makes it even more insulting, because I don't feel like that character was done justice, and I almost feel like a little bit of a character assassination in season 13A by him cheating on Becky and then dying because he was texting while driving. It was not, I felt like, good. I'm not going to call it full-on assassination, but it felt like character assassination to me. And he was a very beloved character, so it really hurt. But whatever it was, literally what I put here, I'm not kidding. I said the first part of the season, which is season 13A, because I actually really like season 13, other parts of it, just not 13A. But season 13A felt so sloppily pulled together and full of inconsequential storylines. I think that whole thing I was talking about episodes that feel like filler, and they feel like they don't belong, and they feel like just 1 or 2 episodes that don't have to be there. Well, that is what all of season 13A felt like the entire thing. Except for maybe Claire's cancer, because that did come back and have long-term consequences, and of course Adam's death. But besides that, unfortunately, sadly, the only other storyline that followed us outside of season 13A was Allie and Leo's relationship, and I'm not going to talk about that. But yeah, overall, I personally believe it was the all-time low of the show, and that is saying a lot because season 8 and 9 were boring, but season 13A was just horrendous all around. It is 100% guaranteed spoiled milk, yucky yucky, been in the fridge for way too long. Throw it out. And now our last storyline is so long, but I'm gonna try to briefly do it. It's literally like 3 pages long. So, my title for this one, this is the final one of the video, I promise, and then I'm gonna end it, do a little outro. So the title is Rick's Bullying and the Subsequent Shooting Storyline, disclaimer, about to be a huge rant. So let us begin. Grab some popcorn, refill some if you want. I already finished my cider, so this is gonna be a long one. I do want to preface this by saying that in my personal opinion, it's not really up for discussion. This is the best Degrassi storyline ever. Not including Degrassi Junior High and Degrassi High, because those are also really overdue for a rewatch. But of Degrassi and Degrassi Next Generation and Degrassi Next Class, I personally believe this is the best storyline that they ever did. And if you have some other opinion, please let me know in the comments. Respectfully, let me know, but I really personally just think this isn't up for debate. So when I was doing my research for this video, I thought for some reason that this storyline started in season 2, but lo and behold, it was actually season 3 that we met Rick Murray. And also, crazy fact, he was actually only in 10 episodes overall in total of the show. But I felt like his 10 episodes, you know, he left some of the longest impacts in the entire show. So, quick history lesson, let us go. We first meet Rick in the episode Whisper to a Screen, and he is basically Terry's admirer. Love you, Terry, my God. And they start dating, and then he basically kind of gets abusive with her in their first relationship. They break up, thank the Lord. However, 10 episodes later, she takes him back, he abuses her again, but this time it's the big one. And they're outside in this like social setting, and they're alone for a second, and he pushes her to the ground, but when he pushes her to the ground, her head slams against a rock and she goes into a coma. And then after this, Terry is basically written off the show. I'm going to assume the actress just wanted to leave the show. I was pretty sure she was doing modeling and stuff as well. So maybe she just wanted to leave the show, but yeah, it was crazy. We just never saw her again. And Rick also leaves Degrassi for a short time. But then obviously that's like towards the end of season 3, and at the beginning of season 4, Rick comes back, and that becomes a huge point of contention for the characters, obviously, because everyone basically boycotts against him, and they're just like, it's not fair that Terry, who's basically friends with everybody, had to leave the school while Rick, her abuser, gets to stay, which I will ultimately say, and I'm going to say so much, like, valid. I'm not going to invalidate their feelings. If somebody ever hurt one of my best friends, if somebody put them in a coma and almost potentially killed them by slamming their head, having their head slammed against a rock, I would feel the same way. So can't even blame them for this. But when he returns, he basically gets boycotted against, and he experiences really relentless bullying from mostly everyone in the beginning, because obviously the main people who are pissed at him are Terry's main friend group of like Paige, Jimmy, Spinner. But even Emma, who's trying to be popular in season 4, joins in the hate train and things like that. Obviously, also later on, Jay and Alex, who are friends with Spinner, join in on this. So throughout the first few episodes of the season, I would say his biggest bullies are probably Spinner, Jimmy, as well as Jay a bit. And also Paige, but Paige is like a different kind of bullying. Like Spinner and Jimmy will throw him in a trash can, but Paige will just insult him and say he needs to get the hell out of here. And once again, I have to say, I'm never going to condone bullying, but I also can't say that I don't understand where these young teenagers, because at the time, that was season 4, those group of kids specifically would have been like junior year, I believe. I can't say that I don't see where these 16, 17-year-olds are coming from. I don't condone bullying, but I do also see their POV in this case. But on the other hand, what really excels this storyline even more, and what propels it so forward in, I think, most of our mind, is that it also explored Rick for the first time. And such an interesting character, very complex. But we're going to get to that. We'll get to that a little bit later. So he starts to become more interconnected with other people in the storylines, if different cliques. And that, I already told you that, to me, is effective storytelling. He becomes intertwined with different cliques because he himself, I believe, got held back a year because he had to miss school. So at this point, he would actually be in Toby and Emma and JT's kind of grade in 10th grade, even though technically he's a junior, alongside Paige and Spinner and Jimmy. So he becomes friends with Emma and Toby over time. And that, like I said, is one of the reasons why I think this is so excellent. And it's going to get even more excellent once we get to Time Stands Still. You just wait. So with this episode, I think this is the first time I can really remember 100% getting, for the first time, different characters who usually don't interact together all being pulled in for a shared storyline that progresses naturally throughout the season and then leads to a big moment. And this is the first time I can personally think about that happening in Degrassi. And of course, the iconic moment where it all bubbles up is Time Stands Still, part 1 and part 2. Once again, a two-parter that does it well. So I'm gonna try my best to not just give you a synopsis, because the first time I tried to film this on my iPhone, I'm not kidding, this is what took up most of the space. So I'm gonna try to not just give you a synopsis here. So I'm gonna try to run through this quickly. I'm gonna be looking at my phone a lot, so I just don't get off course and I just read the script, okay? Shut up, Andrea, read the script. So, story time. So things finally seem to be going pretty well for Rick, right? He's found a new friendship with Toby. Emma's being like kind of nice to him, even though she was one of the original people who was kind of like targeting him this season because she was trying to be popular, but then she felt bad for him. Dumb rookie mistake, Emma. And then of course he starts to develop a crush on her. Emma's cute, cool. And of course, he is still getting extensively bullied because Time Stands Still Part 1, I'm pretty sure, actually begins with him, what I mentioned, him getting thrown in a dumpster outside of Degrassi. And then, of course, when this happens, Jimmy then gets enlisted by Snake, which, looking back, I feel like Snake probably really regrets this. But Jimmy gets enlisted by Snake to be one of Rick's partners in a little trivia competition called Whack Your Brain alongside Toby and Emma. So already we're seeing characters interact who don't usually interact, because Jimmy bullying Rick is not interaction, but now we're going to see him actually interact with not just Toby and Emma, even though Toby and Jimmy have history. Jimmy and Emma maybe not so much. So you get to see these characters from different kind of groups and grades interact. So that's number 1. Love that. Cool stuff. Also, I did write this here in the script, and it is a side note, but I'm just going to say it because it's so freaking funny. Fun fact, but they actually managed to put a Heather Sinclair Easter egg in this episode, because the only reason that Snake asked Jimmy to go into the Whack a Brain whatever competition is because Heather Sinclair apparently got like mono, I believe, or something, so she couldn't compete. She was sick. And I don't think you understand, I would pay real deal money to imagine, to get just an imagination of what Heather Sinclair would have been like on the same team as Rick Murray. That would have been iconic. But anyways, back to the plot of the story. So through this experience, both Jimmy and Rick kind of have this very slight enemies to at least friendly acquaintances, I would say, development. But then Spinner and Jay decide to play a really mean joke on Rick, because after Rick got thrown into the dumpster, basically he vandalizes, I guess. It's just paint, I believe, but he, from what I remember at least, I don't know. I don't think he keyed their cars or anything. Maybe he did, but I definitely remember he painted them. He vandalized Jay and Spinner's cars, so they obviously wanted big revenge, and they got Alex to help them. Remember, if, you know, I'm gonna try my best. I know, like, people who have already seen Degrassi are like, shut the hell up, get to the point, but whatever, deal with it. So, a little nice touch that I will always love about this episode is Rick's mom telling Toby how Rick told her this really obviously deluded lie that Rick was like, he had become really close with Toby, Emma, and Jimmy, and they were basically inseparable. It's really small moments like this that I think are very subtle storytelling, and get the point across of what you're kind of trying to, you know, project, which is that Rick is not in the correct mental state, without just being like on the nose about it. Like out here, you know, Peter's meth addiction. What was that? Emma's eating disorder. Yucky, yucky beans. What was that? But this is subtle storytelling, and it's good. And as I've said before, I actually think the mental health representation overall, for the most part, was well done in Degrassi. I genuinely believe they talked to mental health professionals before writing and depicting stuff on screen, which is intelligent. And I feel like you can always kind of tell that. We can even see it kind of with Rick. So anyways, it's the day of the Whack Your Brain competition, and Jay and Spinner, as well as Alex, have a little surprise prepared for Rick, a la Carrie, and I am not speaking Bradshaw, because in maybe I would say the second most iconic moment of the show, the first most iconic I'm gonna get to later, but probably in the second most iconic moment of the show, Rick gets to answer the final question, and he gets it correct, and it's this glorious moment, and you actually for a second feel happy for him, because the show has somehow made you feel slight sympathy for this abuser. You feel happy for him. And then yellow paint falls on him, and chicken feathers fall on him, and he is humiliated in front of the entire school. And people are laughing. I tell you, my mouth dropped, jaw on the ground. The episode ends with him going to his house, same day, still in the paint and feathers, and he gets his father's gun. And the silence is deafening. I am not kidding. I'm pretty sure I was not watching Degrassi in 2004. Please, I would have been like 6. But I'm pretty sure they would have aired this episode over the span of 2 weeks, because they air once a week. Can you imagine ending that episode and having to wait? For my 2004 peeps who did that, please tell me, how was that? That's crazy. Oh my God. Anyways, the next episode is where shit really goes down. And this is where I think the storyline, it could have really flunked. It could have had a great first part, and then the second part just tanked, but it did not do that. And it actually excelled even more. And we'll talk about that. And yeah. And I'm hopefully this is the last time I repeat this, I hope, but this is good storytelling, people. Okay? So let's begin. Same day, still in his paint and feathers, Rick goes to school, gun in his bag, holding it with his hand, ready to shoot at any opportunity. First, he goes to Paige, because obviously he would assume Paige had something to do with it. Paige is like, that was super immature. I didn't think it was funny. That was childish. And she basically like was like, I had no part in doing that. And then he's like, oh. And it's actually this really great moment that shows you that I don't think Rick had bad intentions. He came to a fucking school with a gun. But there's a moment after he talks to Paige where he goes to the bathroom and he really contemplates, and he's actually like, maybe I I may be a little extra right now. Maybe I should go home. Maybe people aren't out to get me, you know? And so he goes to wash up in the bathroom. He goes in one of the stalls, you know, as one does. And who comes into the stall? I am narrating this as if you've never seen this. And who comes into the stall but Spinner and Jay? And they instantaneously notice the yellow paint and the feathers. So of course they are like, let's play another joke. We're just so fucking funny. And they basically put the blame on Jimmy as part of the joke, even though Jimmy had nothing to do with this fucking prank. They put the blame on Jimmy. And this is where the episode reaches its momentum. Rick is pissed because it's one thing for it to be someone like Paige or Spinner or Jay or anything, or like Alex, but he, in his own deluded reality, literally told his mom that him, Jimmy, Toby, Emma are inseparable. He clearly sees Jimmy as a friend after one day. Whatever. And now we get to the most iconic scene of the whole show, hands down. I don't think this one can be up for debate. If you can name me one more iconic scene, we can put it as a potential, but I don't think so. And this is something else that I would just like to say, is that Spinner and Jay, stupid teenagers, but not bad intentioned. And that's what makes also this so heartbreaking because it's so complex from so many angles. But we'll get to that. So obviously this is an extra blow for Rick. He's pissed and he goes out into the hall. And who does he see? Mr. Graham. He sees Mr. Graham himself, Aubrey Graham, in his locker. And he says one of the most iconic, "You made me do this," and then shoots him in the back as Jimmy's trying to run away, and he falls to the ground. And then, out of nowhere, Craig comes, and Craig finds his fucking best friend's body on the ground. Oh my God. Where has Craig been this whole episode? Imagine, first of all, parallels. Obviously Jimmy didn't die, but Craig being the one to find Jimmy, and then Eli being the one to find Cam. Parallels. Oh my God, cinematic. But at this point, mouth on the ground, tears on the ground, the love of my life, Craig Manning, you know, finds him. He's freaking out. And this next part is also excellent. Emma and Toby are like in the same area probably. I don't know why. They're just in the same area. They probably heard that there was an effing gun. They heard the gunshot. They're in the same area as Sean for some reason. I don't remember why, but they're in the same area as Sean, which obviously is Emma's ex-boyfriend. Used to be friends with them before he went all gangsta over here. I don't know. And they have this thing where basically, you know, instinctively, Sean is like, I'm going to protect Emma. I'm going to protect Toby. And I'm going to try to not fight off Rick, but make it so he's unarmed. And it leads to this tragic fight where Sean almost involuntarily, accidentally shoots Rick to death. And that's just, this has been me like 20 minutes ranting about just the episodes that led up to this big episode. But then there's everything afterwards, because what is so excellent about this episode is not just all of the pre-stuff or all of the in-the-moment stuff of Time Stands Still, but also all the post stuff. And I have an itemized list. So there's a really... Well, something I do want to mention, because I wrote it down here in my script, so I want to mention it. At the end of this episode, there is actually a really excellent conversation between multiple characters of this show who are all related to each other in some distinct way. Like Ashley is Toby's sister, Toby and Emma are friends, Snake is Emma's like stepfather basically, and they are all having conversations that feel real about this real event without it just feeling like giving social commentary for the sake of giving social commentary, because it feels like some conversations that would really be had. And I myself have never gone through a school shooting, thank the Lord, but I have gone through something traumatic in terms of like a school event where something happened, not to me thankfully, but to someone else. And it was exposed, and I remember all the conversations that happened around it the week afterwards, and it was very much, it felt like this conversation at the end of this episode. And there's one line from Snake especially that I just want to repeat because I love it, where he basically says that I can't believe that a shooting has happened at Degrassi. And Emma is like, well, Degrassi is a school, it's not a sainthood. And he says, yeah, that's the point. There shouldn't be shootings at schools. And it's this very on the nose moment, very obvious what it's talking about. It's a very topical issue, even in 2004, even in 2022. And yet it felt subtle. It didn't feel like just like gross, icky, like, hey guys, we're so woke. It felt real. And I think that is excellent. I would just like to say, I really look at myself sometimes and I look like a pale ghost in this lighting, so I promise I am not dead. But anyways, now that I have the meat out of the way, we are gonna get to the potatoes. So what makes this be, in my opinion, the best, most expensive wine on the toppest shelf of the wine cellar isn't just like the shock factor tragedy of this event. But there are two main reasons why this works so well, and I have listed them here. Number one, as weird as this sounds, the shooting felt, unfortunately, like the natural progression of this story, where this mentally unwell, bullied kid is pushed to his breaking point, and unfortunately, this is a scenario where, at least in this specific moment, it could have been easily preventable, and everything just led up so naturally that it never felt out of character for any character. And it's to the point where it almost even villainizes some main characters like Jay or Spinner. Not because they're villains, but because this is a scenario where it felt so natural and real, and they made mistakes, but they were mistakes that may seem small when you're 16, 17 and you're not thinking about it, but are big in the long term. And that is some real ass shit. Some things that you say that are so stupid that you don't realize could actually hurt other people and could potentially ruin people's lives. Number two is that this might be one of the few storylines, besides some of the ones that I've mentioned, that had genuine long-lasting consequences for not just one or two characters, but for a myriad of different characters. And it basically, I kind of referenced this in one of my Degrassi couples videos when I said I could make a whole video on this one day. This basically changed the entire story progression of the show from here on forth for so many people. And I'm going to explain. So, in the next episode, Back to Black, Sean leaves the show basically for a while, probably because the actor wanted to leave, but still, I think this is one of those times, unlike Adam, where an actor wanting to leave the show felt natural because it made sense that he had to deal with his trauma of basically feeling that guilt that he accidentally killed someone. So even if it was just the actor wanting to leave the show, it felt really natural for the storyline progression. Number two, Jimmy's long-lasting friendship with Spinner basically comes to not a conclusive end because they do reunite at the very end, but it basically comes to a very, very long end for a very, very long time. After he finds out, after Jimmy finds out that Spinner had an indirect cause in him being paralyzed in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, I completely understand Jimmy. Jimmy also outing Spinner's involvement in his being paralyzed for the rest of his life, basically causing Spinner's entire life to be changed. He loses all of his biggest friends except for basically Jay. And then also, Jimmy gets affected the most, obviously, because his biggest dream was to play basketball professionally, and now he's in a wheelchair for the rest of his goddamn life because of this one life-changing moment where he didn't even really do anything wrong, technically. So, yeah, I just, all I have to say about it. The last side rant I want to go off on, because I wrote it here in the script and it's something I feel strongly about, and if this is the last Degrassi video I do for a while anyways, might as well just get it out the way. I always, when people think of Degrassi, they'll typically think of this storyline, and they'll think of probably like season 4 circa storylines, and I hate people, usually older generations, not like boomers, but just older generations who say things like they only watch the original seasons because only the original seasons were good, and that there's so many people who say, oh, I only watched like when Jimmy got shot. That's like when the show was good. Then it got like bad. No, it didn't. Like I'm not kidding you, I once had a substitute teacher my junior year of high school who was a Degrassi aficionado over here, who tried telling me this very same argument about how the original seasons were the best and whatever, acting like they were the biggest Degrassi fan when I was like, sure, okay. And they didn't even know who Maya Matlin was. Like, who are you talking to? Like, get out of my face! Oh my god. But yeah, as much as I despise people who say that, there is credit. Like, once you take away your dumb nostalgia, your dumb teen nostalgia because you watched 2004 when you were 16 and I was only 6. I'm sorry for being young. It really can't be argued that season 4 was the best season of the show, and this storyline was the best storyline of the entire show. And was probably a big part of why season 4 was one of the best, and I will truly die on that grave. Like, the level of storytelling, at least especially for the older seasons, because by season 10s to 11 to 12, 13, and 14, they really did try to fix these problems and eradicate it, but the earlier seasons had a little bit of problems with the way that they would tell stories. But in season 4, with like Rick's bullying and everything, the level of storytelling was just so well done and like ambitious almost, to the point where I can't really compare Degrassi. Like, I don't want to compare Degrassi to any other show who's done like school shootings, kind of like I did in my last video. But all I'm going to say is I don't think I've seen another show personally that has done it the way Degrassi has done it. And I've seen a few shows, I'm not going to name any names, that have done school shooting storylines. I mean, Degrassi even did one later on in Next Class, which I would love to revisit one day in a separate video once I rewatch that. But I don't think that there's anything like Degrassi in terms of telling a storyline like this in a TV show made for teenagers, young adults, that never felt exploitative like some others might feel. This one just felt like telling a really good natural story. So yeah, that was like 3 pages long. It's over. I would also just like to end this in 2 things. Number 1 is that there are so many storylines that I didn't mention because I already knew this was going to be a super long video, and there are some that I actually even wrote that I ended up cutting out. So special honorable mentions to, in my opinion, Adam's entire story arc. Special mention to, what's it called? To Fiona's drinking problem, her alcoholism. And then off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many others that were really, really extremely bad. I'm sure there are more like after school special, as I like to call it, episodes that I can't think of off the top of my head. But for the most part, those ones that I mentioned to me are the worst offenders. All the other stuff that I cut out was mostly just really good stuff, I believe, like the alcoholism with Fiona and like Adam's storyline that unfortunately, that would have made this video so much longer. The second thing I want to say before I leave is that if you came to this channel to watch Degrassi, please stick around for other things that are not Degrassi, because like I mentioned in the beginning, I have just been feeling like very uninspired to make videos, and I feel like that's because I feel like I'm almost forced to make Degrassi videos. So I want to venture away from that, and I actually was feeling very creative this weekend, and I have lots of ideas for things I'd like to do, but it will not be about Degrassi, because on top of that, there's so many good Degrassi content on YouTube, I feel like, over the past few years. I feel like Amanda Baby's video about Degrassi is very good and should be watched. I've had this one Degrassi video that has been on my watch later for months now. I'm pretty sure it's literally called the Degrassi video. I'm sure you've seen it pop up. I'm sure that video, it's like almost 2 hours long. I'm sure it's so much better than whatever I could ever come up with. I feel like the Degrassi thing has been done. There's nothing else for me to really add to the conversation. If anything, I should watch that Degrassi video, the really long one, because I'm sure it's gonna be excellent quality. Hopefully some people watch this, and then maybe some people watch the next one, which hopefully will be out sometime before 7 months later. I'm gonna leave. Bye.